In a small town outside Newark, New Jersey, a 34-year-old woman named Michelle discovered a birth certificate that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her life. The mother's name listed was not the woman who raised her, but rather the most famous voice in American music history, Whitney Elizabeth Houston. This is the story of Whitney Houston's greatest secret, a daughter she gave birth to when she was just 17 years old, a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life and explain the deep sadness that lived behind her legendary smile. The year was 1980. Whitney Houston was not yet the global superstar the world would come to know. She was a teenager from Newark, discovered by photographer Bruce Weber while shopping with her mother at a local department store. Her modeling career was just beginning, her voice still largely unknown to anyone outside her church choir. But Whitney was carrying a secret that would change everything. She was pregnant. In conservative 1980s America, an unwed teenage pregnancy could destroy a young woman's future before it even began. For an aspiring entertainer with gospel roots and a family reputation to protect, it was nothing short of catastrophic. Whitney faced an impossible choice that would define every relationship she had for the rest of her life. The father was Marcus Williams, a college student Whitney had met during a summer church camp in Georgia. They had fallen deeply in love, planning a future that seemed bright and full of promise. But when Whitney discovered she was pregnant, Marcus's family made it clear that a teen pregnancy would derail his pre-med studies and destroy his chances at medical school. The pressure from both families was overwhelming. She was just a baby herself, recalled her cousin Dionne Warwick years later, in a private conversation that was recorded without her knowledge. Nippy was terrified. She knew having a baby would end any chance she had at a singing career, but she also couldn't bear the thought of ending the pregnancy. It was tearing her apart. Whitney's mother, Sissy Houston, was faced with an impossible situation. Her daughter had tremendous talent, the kind of voice that came along once in a generation. But she was also a devout Christian who believed in family values and taking responsibility for one's actions. The family held secret meetings for weeks, trying to find a solution that wouldn't destroy Whitney's future while honoring their religious beliefs. The decision they reached would remain hidden for over 40 years. Through her church connections, Sissy arranged for Whitney to spend the final months of her pregnancy with a Christian family in rural Pennsylvania. The official story was that Whitney was attending a private boarding school to focus on her studies before pursuing her entertainment career. In reality, she was living under an assumed name, working in a small-town diner, and preparing to give birth to a child she would never publicly acknowledge. On March 15, 1981, Whitney gave birth to a healthy baby girl she named Michelle, after the Beatles song Michelle that had been playing on the radio when she first felt the baby kick. For 3 weeks, Whitney cared for her daughter in secret, bonding with the child while knowing she would have to give her up. The adoptive parents were carefully chosen by Sissy Houston, a childless couple from the same church network, people who were financially stable and deeply religious. Robert and Janet Thompson were unable to have children of their own and had been praying for a baby for over 10 years. They promised to raise Michelle with love and give her opportunities Whitney couldn't provide as a teenage single mother. The goodbye was heartbreaking. Whitney wrote a letter to her daughter that she sealed and gave to the adoptive parents, asking them to give it to Michelle when she turned 18. In it, she explained her decision and promised that not a day would go by that she didn't think about her first child. "I'm giving you up not because I don't love you, but because I love you so much," Whitney wrote. "I want you to have a life filled with stability, education, and opportunities that I can't give you right now. Please know that you will always be my first baby, my heart walking around outside my body." Whitney returned to Newark 6 weeks later, throwing herself into her music career with an intensity that surprised everyone around her. She began recording demos, performing at local clubs and pursuing the record deal that would make her famous. But those who knew her best noticed a change, a deep sadness in her eyes that never fully disappeared, even during her happiest moments. The secret weighed heavily on Whitney throughout her rise to superstardom. Every Mother's Day was torture. Every time she held other people's babies, she thought about Michelle. When she finally had Bobby Christina with Bobby Brown in 1993, she would often say privately that this wasn't actually her first child, though she never explained what she meant. Michelle Thompson grew up in suburban Philadelphia, raised by loving parents who told her she was adopted, but never revealed her birth mother's identity. They kept their promise to Whitney, waiting until Michelle's 18th birthday to give her the sealed letter and reveal the truth about her biological parents. The revelation was overwhelming. Michelle had grown up listening to Whitney Houston's music, never knowing she was hearing her own mother's voice. She had watched The Bodyguard countless times, unaware that the woman on screen had carried her for 9 months and held her for 3 precious weeks. For years, Michelle wrestled with whether to contact Whitney. She hired private investigators who confirmed her birth certificate was authentic. She obtained DNA evidence through discarded items from Whitney's concerts. She even attended several of Whitney's performances, sitting in the audience and wondering if her famous mother would somehow sense her presence. But Michelle never approached Whitney directly. She understood the devastating impact such a revelation would have on Whitney's career and reputation. Instead, she watched from afar as her biological mother struggled with addiction, failed relationships, and the pressures of fame. She saw the pain in Whitney's eyes during interviews and wondered if some of that sadness came from the secret they shared. Whitney, meanwhile, had hired private investigators of her own to keep track of Michelle's life. She knew when Michelle graduated high school, when she got married, when she had children of her own. Whitney secretly paid for Michelle's college education through an anonymous scholarship fund. She attended Michelle's wedding, disguised and sitting in the back of the church, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter promise to love and honor the man she had chosen. The closest they ever came to meeting was in 2009, when Michelle worked up the courage to attend one of Whitney's comeback concerts in Philadelphia. She bought a front-row ticket, hoping Whitney might see her and recognize something familiar in her face. During the performance, Whitney seemed to look directly at Michelle several times, and there was a moment when their eyes met that felt electric and painful and full of unspoken recognition. After the concert, Michelle waited by the stage door for hours, but Whitney had already left through a private exit. Later, hotel staff found Whitney in her room, sobbing uncontrollably. When asked what was wrong, Whitney could only say, "I saw someone tonight who looked like someone I used to know." The truth about Whitney's secret daughter began to surface only after her death in 2012. Michelle, now a successful teacher and mother of 3, decided it was time to honor her birth mother's memory by sharing their story. She reached out to journalists with evidence of her parentage, not seeking fame or fortune, but wanting the world to know about Whitney's capacity for sacrifice and love. "I want people to understand that my mother made the most selfless decision of her life when she gave me up," Michelle told reporters. "She was just a teenager, but she put my future ahead of her own desires. That takes incredible strength and love." The revelation explains so much about Whitney's later struggles. The guilt of giving up a child, combined with the pressure of keeping such a massive secret, contributed to the emotional pain that Whitney medicated with drugs and alcohol. Every song about love and loss carried the weight of her first heartbreak, not over a romantic relationship, but over the child she had to surrender. Michelle kept the letter Whitney wrote her, now yellowed with age and worn from being read thousands of times. In it, Whitney predicted that she might become famous, but warned that fame could be dangerous and destructive. She urged Michelle to choose a normal, quiet life filled with real relationships and genuine happiness. "If you're reading this, it means you've grown up to be the beautiful woman I always knew you would become," Whitney wrote. I hope your parents have loved you the way you deserve to be loved. I hope you've never felt abandoned or unwanted, because you were the most wanted thing in my world. I just wasn't strong enough to keep you and give you the life you deserved. Today, Michelle Thompson Martinez lives quietly in suburban Philadelphia, working as an elementary school teacher and raising her 3 children. She has Whitney's eyes and voice, though she never pursued music professionally. She keeps a small shrine to Whitney in her home, with concert programs, album covers, and the letter that connected them across 4 decades of separation. The story of Whitney Houston's secret daughter adds a new dimension to our understanding of America's most beloved voice. Behind the glamour and fame was a woman who made the ultimate sacrifice, giving up her first child so that child could have a better life. The pain of that decision lived in every note she sang, every tear she cried, every struggle she faced. Whitney Houston wasn't just the voice of a generation. She was a mother who loved her daughter enough to let her go, and who carried that love and loss with her until the day she died.